January was a big reading month.
You say that every month.
Do I?
Yes, you do.
Do I? Welcome to Mad on Books, where I talk about fantasy mostly, science fiction sometimes, and comics occasionally. January was possibly too much. I overplanned myself. I'm hosting one read-along. I joined a couple of readalongs. I had a buddy read. I joined the readathon on the Keymark Discord. I think I overwhelmed myself slightly. I know that Mike has mentioned this before and kind of warned that newer booktubers like me do this and that it's a bad idea. And I ignored him and his wisdom gained through experience and did exactly what he said. But all of it was fun. I just had to adjust my plan a little bit. So let's look at what I read first. The best thing in January, if not the biggest, was Assassin's Apprentice. If you don't know already, I am hosting a read-along on the Grimoire Discord, link down below, to read one of these every month. The only difficulty is, one of the difficulties is that there's 16 of them. So one of these every month is going to take until April next year. But the real difficulty is reading one of these and not immediately diving into the second one. I, like a horrible read-along host, cheated a little bit and already read this at the end of December. But I'm counting it for this month because it's part of the read-along. I'll link up here to the read-along announcements, and I'll link down below to the Grimoire if you want to join us. Next month, it's Royal Assassin, and you could join anytime. If you've already read Farseer, you could join us in 2 months and start with Rainwall Chronicles. If you've already read that, you could join us 3 months later, and so on and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to continuing reading this. This was awesome. If you haven't read it, I did a review, so I won't say too much now. Definitely go and check out that review if you haven't read Farseer, and you really are missing out if you haven't read Farseer. Next, you're probably getting tired of this GIF already, but I joined the A Song of Ice and Fire read-along. And this month reread for me Game of Thrones. I've read this, I think, 3 times before, so now it's 4 times. It's kind of chunky. Everybody knows it. Unless you've been living under a rock, you probably don't need me to tell you anything about it because you've at least seen the series. This is basically the first season of the series, and hopefully you've also read the book. George R.R. Martin's writing is excellent. His world is interesting and exciting and rather bleak. There is pretty much nobody who's happy in this book. So it can be a little heavy, but it's a super enjoyable read. Amazing characters, amazing intrigue and war stuff going on. And it only ramps up next month this month, February, in Clash of Kings. Looking forward to that. I also joined a read-along for Shogun. And like I said, I was a little overplanned this month, and Shogun was the thing I decided to drop, or at least slow down on. The beginning of it, I was just having a hard time with how different it is. It's third-person omniscient, so it's everywhere at all times, kind of jumping around with different characters. There's a lot of weird sexy time stuff happening in here, which felt very 70s and a bit just bumped me out of just flowing with the story. I do want to continue reading this. I didn't get that far, as you can see. Only 116 pages in. I want to continue, but I just realized I was stressing myself because I was attached to too many read-alongs. and just didn't really enjoy that. So I kind of dropped this, but I will continue. All through the month, I was reading the short stories in the Paper Menagerie, which is a collection of short stories by Ken Yu. It's pretty much every one of them. Someone's honking. Every one of them is amazing. I'm so looking forward to reading Dandelion Dynasty after reading this, because all of these short stories in so few pages manage to make you extremely emotional, manage to explain amazing creative concepts in world building, in science fiction, or also more fantasy kind of stories. A lot of the stories in here are science fiction, which is interesting because it's quite different from what I've heard about him being a fantasy author. But I cannot recommend this short story collection highly enough. It's also an excellent thing just as a pause, as a palate cleanser in between other things. These are just such good stories, so enjoyable, so emotional, so creative. I can't speak highly enough of this book. Another read-along that I swore myself into was The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which I read with Tori. I'm really glad I did. Tori's one of my favorite people on Booktube and has become a good friend. And this is a heavy and difficult book, but it's very, very good. The author, Tim O'Brien, was in Vietnam, and this is a story or a bunch of stories, kind of short stories, but kind of in a chronological order and told as one big story, of him and the soldiers that he was in Vietnam with and their experiences. It's not necessarily a true story, and he makes that clear. It's fiction based on true experience. So, and that's kind of one of the themes running throughout the whole thing, is how much metaphorical truth or spiritual truth or experiential truth does a story contain versus how much accuracy truth does it contain. And he plays around a lot with that. These are obviously not 100% exactly as it happened, but he's trying to get to the truth of the experience that they had there, which was obviously pretty horrific, but also pretty heroic in some ways and pretty close bond brothership kind of thing. And it's such a good book. I can highly recommend it. It's also a pretty short read, so it fits in easily between other things. So definitely awesome. We also, Tori and I, did a live stream chat with Philip Chase, because he teaches this, or one of the stories from it at least, or has taught it. And we had a great chat. It was really awesome. You can go back and look at it if you want. Really, really good book. Really, really good discussion. And then to top off a chunky month, I read The Bone Hunters in my ongoing Malaz Everything read. This is the 6th book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. It is, I really suck at ranking, but I would put this in my top 3 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen 10 books. I love this book. There is so much interesting stuff that happens in it. It is so exciting, so tense, so much awesome lore stuff that comes up in it. I just, and also the characters, the particular characters of the extremely large cast of the Malazan Book of the Fallen who are in this are some of my all-time favorite Malazan characters. It's just an awesome all-round book. And then I've also talked about this already on a review video, but I don't know exactly how it happened, but I got myself into the Chanur novels, which are science fiction, by C.J. Cherryh. These are really interesting science fiction. I won't go into too much detail. Like I said, I already did a review just a week ago. But there are a lot of sentient species, and they suddenly have their first encounter with humans. And the humans are the other. The humans are the alien. And we end up getting to know the honey really well. The honey are these cat people on the cover. I know the covers look cheesy. The books are actually pretty awesome. And this is 5 books. Yeah, it's 2 omnibus editions, which is the easiest way to get it if you don't want to look for it used, because these were written in the 80s. Sometimes they feel like they were written in the 80s, but overall, they're really, really enjoyable. I had a great time reading these. I didn't expect it. I read the first one, immediately started the second one, raced through 3 of them in 4 days. Now I'm in the 4th one, and we'll finish the 5th one soon. Really, really fun, really, really interesting ideas in these books. And what did I listen to this month? It's a little bit different this month. I actually had quite a lot of time out of my flat. I was running around town. I live in Berlin. I don't own a car, so it's slower getting around town. And Berlin is really huge. So if you go anywhere, it's going to take at least half an hour. Very often going somewhere takes an hour. And I was out a lot more this month than I usually am. So I actually listened to Priest of Lies by Peter McLean, the second book in the War for the Rose Throne. It's getting better and better. I did a review, go back and have a look, of Priest of Bones, the first book, and I really, really enjoyed it. I also listened to that one. It was narration by John Lee. This is also narration by John Lee. And his voice so well suits the story. And the story is also awesome. The characters are great. It's very Peaky Blinders vibes. If Peaky Blinders with swords and magic is kind of the headline of my review of the first book. In the second book, it's starting to get a bit more onto its own track. And things are being introduced, which makes it feel slightly more original, like less just Peaky Blinders with swords and magic. But I'm really enjoying it, especially John Lee's narration. I have heard, unfortunately, that John Lee's, I don't know why, but isn't the narrator for the 3rd and the 4th books. So I'll probably be reading them in print with my eyeballs. Also, just quickly, I watched some really awesome things this month as well. I've got a good friend, an offline in Berlin friend, who doesn't have the streaming service that you need in Germany to watch House of the Dragon. So I invited him over for a binge day, and we had a nice Saturday with good food and booze in the afternoon and evening. But he came over in the morning. We had breakfast together. We had lunch together. We had dinner together and watched all of House of the Dragon in one day, which is a bit extreme, but it was also a lot of fun. Nice way to spend a day with a friend with, breaks in between for nice food and a bit of booze. And we had a great time. So that's now, I've seen House of the Dragon, I think the whole series 3 times. And it's worth it. It's good. It's really, really good. I have enjoyed it so much. I also, maybe because this science fiction urge is coming up in me again, I watched the entire Expanse series. I think I actually started in December. I didn't watch 6 seasons all in January. But whenever I turned on the television, basically, I was either watching other booktubers on YouTube or I was watching The Expanse for a number of weeks. And it's got its high and low points, but in a lot of things, I think it's some of the best science fiction on television. I love it and really, really enjoyed it. I'm really sorry that it didn't continue because it has the feeling in the 6th season that there's more. There should be more. There could be more. And it just kind of ends. And that's a bit of a pity, but it got a lot more than Firefly got, so that's something. And I started The Last of Us. When this comes out, there will be 4 episodes out already. Today, as I'm recording, there's only 3 out. They have been actually pretty amazing. I realized the main thing that the series did for me is I realized I don't remember the game hardly at all. I remember some visuals from the game, but I don't really remember the story hardly at all. I played it a long time ago when it first came out. The series has been, however, well written, well acted, some of the CGI has been a little cheesy looking, like the view of Boston destroyed and whatever. I was like, yeah, that looks kind of dodgy. But overall, it's been extremely good, and I've really been enjoying it. And the third episode completely broke my heart. I've said it before, I don't really cry when I read books. I don't really cry when I watch movies or TV. But I do get very moved and choked up. And the third episode of The Last of Us, yeah. It was a fun month for collaborations at the beginning of the month, or sort of middle of the month, late middle of the month, maybe third quarter of the month. I invited Evie and Derry and Madison to talk about the first book of the Farseer trilogy, the Realm of the Elderlings read-along that I'm doing. And Derry is the queen expert of all things Realm of the Elderlings and has no competition for the title. And Evie has recently, or the last, I think, year or two, fallen madly in love with it. Madison has just finished it not too long ago, and the whole series, and is starting with my read-along another read of it. So I thought, perfect ladies to have a chat with. We had an awesome chat. It was a lot of fun. I'm thinking at the end of March, we'll do another one, which will be a spoiler chat for the entire Farseer trilogy, and maybe do one or two of those, because we did this chat and we were enjoying it so much. And then we realized, hey, there's all sorts of things we haven't talked about. And we were already in the first chat talking about doing a second one. So maybe at the end of March, maybe we'll do two. We'll see. I'll talk to them and see what we think. Josh from Red Fury Books has started a new series called Brunch and Books, where it's brunch his time anyway. It was my time. It was kind of evening, 6 or 7 in the evening. But he invited me on the first episode, which was an honor. Thank you, Josh. And Madison and Jordan, and the four of us had just a cozy Sunday chat about books in general, which was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And I hosted a chat with Tori and Philip Chase, and we had a chat about the things they carried, which I mentioned earlier. Always an enlightening chat with Philip Chase, and also really interesting with Tori to get like an author perspective, Philip Chase as well. Myself not really being an author, I don't think about writing when I'm thinking about reading, but both of them do. So we had an awesome, really, really interesting chat. Coming up in February, when this comes out, we will have already had a chat with Scott and Mike and Steve on my channel, another Friends on Books number 5, I think. Yeah, number 5, about Game of Thrones. So I assume that was fun, but for me, I'm talking about that in the future still. And I'm reading the ongoing read-along. I've got Royal Assassin in the Farseer trilogy going. On the other ongoing read-along, I've got Clash of Kings coming up for the Song of Fire and Ice, Song of Ice and Fire read-along. I've got Reaper's Gale, the 7th book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen coming up, which is part of my Malaz Everything Read/Read. And I've got a read-along with, or a buddy read with Philip Chase. We're going to read the first book in the Book of the New Sun. So The Shadow of the Torturer by Gene Wolfe. We're going to read that together, and we will be doing a chat. I can't say right now exactly when because we haven't scheduled it yet, but I will make sure that people know about that when it comes up. I also want to finish the 5th book of the Chanur trilogy, or Chanur series. And otherwise, I'm just going to play it by ear, because with so many read-alongs and promises and schedules, whenever I get all of those books finished, I will just read whatever the fuck I want, and we'll see what it is. So that was January, and the little what plan there is for February. I hope you are well. What are you reading in February? What did you read in January? What was the best thing you read in January, and the thing you're most looking forward to in February? keep reading awesome books, whatever the month is, and I will see you next time.